Hello YouTube and welcome to another video. In this one I'm doing some work on the water injection system for the exhaust. I also have to take care of some stuff before I do the final fitment of the engine. I finally get a fuel tank that works in the X2 and I'm doing a little bit of wiring. Lots of stuff to do, so let's get right into it. This is an old X2 relay connector, and after a few minutes in the lathe, this is what it looks like. I threaded the outside of this so that I can drill a hole in my pipe and thread it into the pipe. And I've made a barbed end on this so that I can attach a hose. All I need to do now is cut this off and finish drilling all the way through the end here so that the water can go all the way through. And then these welding tips can thread in here and be Loctited in there so they don't fall off inside my exhaust. I need to make another one. I'm going to make one of these to inject water into the stinger and one into the pipe itself. High strength Loctite to try to make sure this thing stays in place. So I'm going to put some right on the threads, an excessive amount. I got this fitting installed into the water box there. And I've also drilled out the hole and I'm about to install the injector into there. So here is that injector. Unfortunately, I didn't check this one before I installed it, and I got a little bit of Loctite in the hole, and the Loctite hardened up, and so now I need to remove this one. It's probably going to be quite difficult to remove with the Loctite on it. Hey look, it's my injector. I have removed the injectors from the exhaust system because one of them was plugged up with Loctite. The one in the chamber was plugged up with Loctite, and I wanted to increase the size of the one in the stinger. So the one in the chamber is going to be keeping the chamber cool, trying to keep the exhaust system cool. And the one in the stinger is to keep the stinger and the hoses and the water box cool, but also to change the tuning of the exhaust at high RPM. That is the idea. I'll probably make a video on that or explain more of that later, but basically I wanted to increase the size of the one that was in the stinger, so I drilled out the one that was in the chamber because it had the Loctite in it and made it bigger, and now I'm going to put the 0.035 inch injector in the chamber. That's this one. And the one that I drilled, it is this size. This is what bit I used. So it is 0.66 rather. So I've got a 0.066 and a 0.035. So almost twice as big on the stinger than in the chamber. Stainless steel bed plate washers, 84 grams. Custom made aluminum washers, less than half the weight. All right, folks, it's that time to start doing some of the not so interesting stuff to this. I've got to put the bed plate on, get a connector on the end of the ground wire, get some of the plumbing stuff done inside of the hull. I've just pulled the engine out, and I'm mounting the bed plate on it for test fitting. I actually had the fiberglass bed plate. So I mentioned before in one of my videos about how carbon fiber is very strong, very resilient to vibrations and flexing and whatnot, but it doesn't like point loading, and that I would use large washers where I could on this. Well, the mounting on the 4 motor mounts, 1, 2, 3, and 4. They already have big washers. I've replaced the stainless steel ones with aluminum ones. But the part that I'm worried about most here is where it actually mounts to the case of the engine. As you can see, there's not much surface area there. So this is where it has the best chance of actually poking through the bed plate. There's a fairly small contact patch there, and that potentially could break through around these holes. So what I'm actually going to do, if you can see here, there's a step. So the case comes along, there's a bit of a step, and then it steps back down. What I'm actually going to do, and I wish I would have known this before because I do have a mill, I could have put the case in the mill and milled those off. But instead of pulling the engine all apart again, because that would be horrible, I'm actually probably just going to use a flap wheel. I don't know, I might come up with some other idea. I might put a bolt in there and then use a diamond cutter around the outside of the bolt to take this off. But basically what I'm going to do, not basically, exactly what I'm going to do is shave 4 millimeters off here so that I can use a 4 millimeter thick washer between the engine and the base plate, and that will distribute the load over a larger area. And then I'm also going to use large washers on the bottom side of the bed plate. I ended up making this tool so that it will fit in the drill. It's started out as a 1-inch stock of aluminum. I drilled a hole in it that fits over this stud. That keeps it perpendicular with the surface. I've got a piece of sandpaper stuck on one of the washers, and the washer is stuck onto the tool with some crazy glue. I can sand away a nice perpendicular surface. Before, what was happening, I'm not sure if the camera can pick it up. Yes, it can. Before, what was happening, you can see it's actually not sanding at the top. That's because when I was filing it, I was taking more off here. So now with this thing, it will take it off perpendicular to the hole so that the washer will sit on there nice and flat. It is the next morning. My special tool worked a little bit slowly, but it got the job done. I got all of these surfaces turned down nice and flat. And now I can use the aluminum washers. They fit in there nicely like that, and they will sit on top of the bed plate. Now, what I originally wanted to do was use the aluminum washers on both sides of the bed plate. I don't know if I already said that in this video, but I wanted to put 4 washers on the top and sandwich it with 4 washers on the bottom. The problem is that if I use 2 washers, you can see when I put the first one through, there's that much thread sticking out. Now we'll try to wiggle this other one on here, and I'll show you guys. I only have that much thread sticking through, which isn't enough. But what I'm going to do is instead use these washers. They're not as big, but they are thinner. Also not ideal, but I'm going to use the thin washer on the bottom side of the plate. And then I'm going to use an aluminum washer on the top, and then it will screw into the bottom of the engine. All right, I just got the bolts torqued into place. All 4 bolts mounted on with some stainless steel washers on the bottom and the aluminum washers to distribute the load over the top. Again, ideally I would have large washers on the bottom, but I don't have any, and I want to get this in. I've been doing lots of work on the X2, most of it pretty boring stuff, but I thought I would update you guys anyway. I got the bilge pump hooked up. I'm running it always live, and then I'm going to ground the ground side of it through the switch. I've got the main cooling line hooked up. It's coming over here. That is going to go into the bottom of the exhaust, and then I've got the water injection line hooked up. I just have it run full length for now because I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go. I also got the latches installed, and I got a ground terminal soldered on. I just finished soldering this on. It's the main ground. It goes directly to the starter. I'm probably going to run at least one other ground from the main ground terminal, which comes from the battery. I guess you can't see it from here. The main ground terminal is right there. I'm probably going to run one from there to this plate here so that I can ground stuff to the plate without having to run wires back to there. Seeing the engine sitting back in the X2 probably isn't very exciting for most of you, but it is for me because I'm hoping this is the last time it goes in before I get to do some on-water testing. As you can see, I've got the bed plate bolted down. There's one of the bolts there, and the other one is in behind the intake. And yeah, I'm hoping this is the last time it goes in. Hopefully I don't have to take it back out because I forgot something, but that's always a possibility. It's bolted completely down. I'm hooking up some of the lines and stuff. I replaced these bolts on the throttle and choke bracket because, well, the hex ones that were in there were obviously too heavy. They were a little bit longer than these, and they were hex heads. So yeah, shaved a couple of grams doing that. I've been using tie wraps instead of hose clamps, partly because they're lighter, but mostly because I really don't need anything on here. These lines are extremely secure, and so I'm using tie wraps just to give myself a bit of peace of mind. I've got to hook up some of the wiring and continue hooking up the hoses, but I thought I would update you guys a little bit. I'm quite pleased. I'm starting to get more and more excited all the time about testing this. I still do have to do a little bit of fiberglass work. I've got these holes here that need to be plugged. There's one on each side, one over here as well. And I also have to do some modifications to the hood. I pulled an air inlet tube out of it, and I need to replace it or do something about that before I test this, because if it goes upside down, or when this goes upside down, a huge amount of water will rush in through that hole. So all right, folks, this is my fuel cell or fuel tank solution. It is a 3-gallon aluminum fuel tank, and it has 4 AN8 fittings on it, which are too big. So what I'm actually going to do is cut these off and thread them for a 3/8 NPT, and then thread in some 90-degree fittings. So this is going to be the vent. The one on the bottom here, or one of the ones on the bottom, is going to have a 90-degree fitting on it, which is going to go to the feed. The fuel return is going to come out and tee into a line that connects to this. And then the fitting at the bottom, which you can't see, is going to be run up to the top and connected so that I can actually see my fuel level. Because this obviously is not transparent, you can't see through an aluminum tank. Instead of trying to open it up and look in to see how much I have, I'm going to do, Yamaha used to do this on some of their snowmobiles. I think other companies did as well. But basically, by running a fuel line on the outside of the tank, you can actually see where the level is inside of the tank. So I'm going to do that. I will tee my return into it, and it will work fine because I will only be checking the fuel level with the engine off. After a few minutes with a hacksaw, I've got all these cut off, the AN fittings. And after several minutes with a tap, I have it threaded out to a 1/4-inch NPT. So I can thread that into there. I'm waiting for 90-degree fittings because these straight fittings would put the fuel lines going out through the hood, and the ones down here would put the fuel lines coming out underneath the engine. In a previous video, I talked about using expanding foam to lock my fuel tank in place and to support it better. And I was fully planning on purchasing a 2-part expanding foam, the closed cell stuff. but I checked the price on it. It's quite expensive. I don't have any, so it's not like I can use a little bit of something that I already have. So I'm going to take the route that I would probably recommend that nobody else do. I'm going to use some of this stuff. Went to the hardware store looking for just the regular gap filler stuff and found this. Not sure if it's any better or any different. It's low expansion polyurethane foam. I was looking for the low expansion stuff because you can get the like giant gap filler, and I don't want it expanding and pushing the tank up or anything crazy like that. So I'm going to use this. We'll see if it works or not. I don't think I filmed any of the process, but I've got some foam in there. It made an awful mess. As I was doing it, I was second guessing myself saying, what the heck am I doing? I'm waiting for the foam to cure, and while I'm doing that, I decided to do a little bit of wiring. So right now, what I've done is made up this ground cable. It is 2 pieces of 14 gauge just to give me a little extra oomph. So what this is going to do is ground the steering plate to the battery ground. That way, if I want to ground stuff like a switch or lights or a gauge or whatever, I can simply ground to anything on the steering, any one of these bolts on the top. They connect into the steering plate and the steering plate will be grounded. I mentioned in an earlier video to you guys that I was running the pump positive all the time and then I would ground it. And I didn't say why, but there's basically 2 reasons. One reason is that ordinarily you would have to run a wire all the way from the battery up to your switch. So it would go from the battery connector all the way up to the switch, and then the switched power would come all the way back down and go to the pump. In my case, I just have a short positive wire going right to the pump, so it can't interfere with anything or short on anything. And then the ground wire goes from the pump. It will go to the switch wire, which is right here. And then the other wire that comes from my switch can simply go to a ground. So I'm grounding the pump to turn it on. So this wire that used to have to go all the way to the pump, which is this long, can now just come down and go right to this ground. There is the fuel tank. I got a little bit impatient and I took it out. It looks like it's going to be okay. The stuff along here isn't fully cured. After a whole lot of trimming, this is what I'm left with. Not sure how well the camera picks it up, but it's about 1.5 inches or 2 inches deep. And it has a front and sides to it and a bottom. After changing my mind back and forth a few times, this is actually what I'm going to use to hold the fuel tank down, at least for now. I have a strap on each side and a strap going down the back side of it. And the straps that are going to each side are actually riveted on using the holes or the rivets from the exhaust outlets. So I've got one of those on each side. The strap comes up and I use an Allen bolt with a nut on each side here to give me a place to hook the straps onto. And then I've got one of these type where it is bolted down to the fuel tank. And then that strap goes down and connects to the front case of the engine, the magneto cover. I've got the bilge pump hooked up. This is the connector for the bilge pump, and the ground for it is right here, actually connected to that plate. So I hooked up my ground to this plate. So now I can ground stuff to the top here, just like that. And to show that it actually works, I'll just push the button. There you have it. It is working. This is the old e-box off of the 1100 ZXi, and it is approximately 10 inches by 8 inches by 5 inches. I'll break out the scale in a few minutes and weigh it, see how much it weighs. It is kind of ridiculous. And this is what I have reduced it to. I still don't have the voltage regulator or the starter relay mounted, but I'm assuming I will be mounting them on here to kind of match up with what I'm doing now. I've got the CDI box mounted underneath, the coils mounted on top. I didn't have to modify any of the wiring as far as the length of the coil wires or anything like that. And the spark plug wires themselves, I'll be able to shorten them quite a bit, and they will very easily reach the spark plugs, which they're directly over the top of. They should be out of harm's way up there. If I have ignition coil issues, then I will figure something else out. But I don't think I'm gonna have coil issues with those sitting there. I was just about to install the fuel tank and the air intake lid, and I was thinking, oh no, this is gonna be quite the task, because now that I have the coil packs and everything mounted on the surf brace, it's gonna be a real nightmare to get off. And then I removed 2 nuts from there and 1 bolt from here, and I can do this. And the whole thing is folded out of the way. I am getting very close to being able to fire this thing up and see what it sounds like with that new intake, and I'm quite excited about that. It's getting closer and closer all the time to being able to test this, and I'm anxious about it, but I'm also very excited. Extremely happy with the way everything's turning out underneath the hood, and I'm getting closer and closer all the time. I'm supposed to get the fittings tomorrow for the fuel tank, so I should be able to finish the fuel system up. I'm getting 4 90-degree elbows to thread into the tank, and I can get that sorted out. I still have some electrical stuff left to do. I gotta mount the voltage regulator, the starter relay, and then I've gotta hook up the tether switch and the stop and start switch. I've gotta plug a couple of holes up here, still haven't done that. And last, I believe, which I've been putting off forever because I want to find a good location, is the water filter and the water pressure regulator for the water injection system. I'm not sure if I'm going to run the stuff around through the backside here and in through the chamber first and the stinger, or if I'm going to run the stuff over here, which is more likely. Now that I've moved the stuff out of the E-box up onto here, I have lots of space throughout this area. And so I will probably be mounting the filter and the pressure regulator in here, and then running the line across. You can actually see the injector into the stinger right there. As you guys can see, I've been making a huge amount of progress on the X2 project. I hope you guys are half as thrilled as I am about the way things are turning out. One of the huge problems in doing a project like this is trying to figure out where to put everything so that it's not just a complete mess when you're done. I've been taking a lot of time and overthinking a lot of things, but I think in the end it will lead to a product or a machine that kind of works well. Everything doesn't kind of smash together and vibrate together, and it'll be a little bit easier to work on as well. And let's be honest, I'm probably going to have to do a lot of work and tuning on this. So I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen in the next video, but I would like to promise you guys that once I get the fittings and a few other electrical things done, that we will be firing this up in the next video. That is going to do it for this video. I hope you guys are getting excited to hear this thing roar to life and also to see it finally be tested. Those of you who follow this project will know that it has been almost 2 years since I had it on the water, and not only is this a completely new power plant, but the hull has been completely redone as well. So it's going to be very interesting testing this thing, seeing how it handles and seeing how it works. Of course, there's going to be a lot of failures along the way because, well, jet skis. I'll see you next time.